So you may not see me do that here today, but just so you know, a sharp tool makes wood turning fun. A dull tool makes it a bear. So keep your tools sharp and sharpen often. And if you don't want to grind them down and buy new tools all the time, you can get you one of these diamond homes. You know, this one I bought from Alan Lacer. He came and did a demo for the Woodturners in St. Louis one time, and it's been a very invaluable tool for me. So a lot of times when I just want to get a little sharper edge after one cut, I can take this to it and I don't have to grind it. But I'm quicker on the grinder than I am with this. So we'll just put a new edge. I'm going to change that tip again. Just make it a little less blunt than what I had it. I'm going to put a little bit larger bevel on it on for this particular cut, because I'm going to be doing some roughing out. And I want to take a little larger cut. And it's easier to do that if I have a little bigger bevel. Okay, so we're going to slow this down, because we know this is going to be off balance. Make sure this is tight. Go up till I get a little bit of vibration, not a bunch. You know, on a lathe, this is the throw zone. On something that's a little out of balance, you're always better if you put yourself on the other side of it, and you're not over here where you're reaching across it, because that doesn't help you, but to be completely on the other side of it. So as I start this, I'm going to stand on the other side. And so if something, you know, if I were to have a catch, I were to kick it a little bit, there's really no opportunity for me to be standing in the area that if it wanted to do something, it would. It's a pretty intermittent cut, so I just want to take it light. You can't move through it quick. I need to let those intermittent pieces swing around, and I don't want to speed the lathe up, so that means I have to go slower. So we're just going to take some light cuts, get this closer to balanced. Once I get it pretty close, I'll speed it up. If you notice, I'm continuing to cut the same direction we talked about, towards the rim. We're going to have to change that on a natural edge bowl. So on this bowl, when I get out towards the burled rim, I need to make those cuts coming back in, opposite of the direction I've been telling you. Otherwise, it'll grab those points and it'll break them off. So to get a clean entrance cut, I'm going to come back into it. It's a burl, so you have the advantage of the grain goes every which way, so it matters less the direction that you're cutting, because you're trying to follow the grain anyway, and as the grain's going this way, that way, left, right, in, out, you can get away with coming back into it. But even if you were doing just keeping the bark on a regular bowl, you still need to come back into it on the rim. So let's see if I can get it a little more balanced. I'm starting to hang off the tool rest. Hold on, a little fiber. That's part of the job. And this is a pretty good sized chunk of burl. The burl did not go very deep on this particular piece, so it's going to be, this is a elm. I'm not sure what type of elm. The burls had been cut off a tree over a year prior to me getting them. So we have several species that grows in Missouri. Speed it up a little bit, check on this, make sure the tailstock's tight. I do not personally like to lock the tailstock back here, and the reason is I'm always, without knowing it, kind of reaching over and checking that it's tight. And if I lock this in, I always think it's tight, because every time I go over here and turn it a little bit, it's tight. So I almost never lock this in place. A lot of people do and feel uncomfortable if they don't, but on my lathe, it never backs up. And you may have a lathe at home that if you don't lock that, your tailstock backs up. I don't have one of those. So if your tailstock backs up, then obviously you need to lock that. And remember to unlock it, tighten it, and unlock it again. But on a wood like this, it's relatively soft. And we're pushing against the edge where the bark was, which is often softer anyway. So it was not uncommon for this to loosen up as we turn this, and it rubs against that softer wood. It might wear it down a little bit. If you have a live center in there, it might start drilling a hole. I mean, a spur drive, it might start drilling a hole. So you got to keep locking it in, turning it a little tighter, a little tighter. So I'm just trying to do as many push cuts as I can. Just going to get a little closer to the shape I want. Maybe not quite that deep of a cut. And at some point, I'll get closer to where I think I'm closer to a finished bowl, and then I'll start defining that rim. Right now I'm still trying to figure out where the bowl is. Until I figure that out, I don't need to worry about the rim. I'm going to figure out about where my foot's going to be. Very dry wood. The person I bought it from probably had it laying on the ground for a year or two, and I don't know, my uncle and I probably went and picked it up 7-8 months ago, seems like, last summer sometime. All right. So we're slowly finding a bowl inside here. We're just going to keep making the cuts towards the rim. As deep as the lathe is going to allow me. It looks like that's about as deep as I'm going to get. What's that? In class, that's the one thing I like about teaching on mini lathes is, when people have never turned before, a mini lathe is great because if you make a pretty big cut that's too heavy, in most cases, you're going to be able to stop that lathe cold. Now they're putting 1 horsepower motors on some of these mini lathes, so it's not going to be so easy for that to occur. But it's nice to learn on a smaller lathe like that if you've never even held a tool. There's a lot of things you can do on them, especially if you get the ones with speed control. I think I'm stopping behind the rim. So I could probably go a little further. I don't want to get too far up into where I'm breaking out of the rim because then I'll have to make the bowl smaller as I start shaping it. So I'm going to start chasing a shape now, So now I've kind of started to find a bowl here. So it's a little more important as I get closer and closer that I start chasing a shape that I want it to be. All right. So I can see I've got a flat right here, and the bowl's going to have to get quite a bit smaller for me to get through that flat and still make it at that angle out to my rim. So I'll go ahead and get rid of some of this perimeter here, and then I'm going to change the shape a little more. I've also got a pretty wide bottom, so most of these natural edge bowls, when I make them, they're non-functional. I don't want a very large foot on them because I want it to look delicate. I want it to appear that it's not supposed to be used, so I want that foot to be smaller. So I'm going to redefine where that's going to be. I'm going to redefine where this is. Let's say right there. You're going to spend most of your time on the outside of a bowl frequently, because on the outside of the bowl is where you really set how the whole, it's 90% of what you're looking at is the outside of the bowl. So make sure you spend the time necessary to get that shape the way you want it. Don't rush through the outside and think that you're going to make it look better when you do the inside, because that's obviously not the case. With any luck, I'm getting a pretty good cut here. Don't always know till you stop the lathe. My shape's getting closer to what I want it to be. So we'll stop and take a look, kind of see where we're at. You can see I still got a flat here, so I still got to get it smaller towards the rim. But I haven't really started breaking out of my points yet, so that's good. And this is, in terms of burl, this is really a relatively poor piece of burl because I've got nice figure on this side, but most of the rest of the bowl doesn't look very good at all. So if I had my coring system where I could use it here, it would be great because we could knock the center out, because the best bowl is not this one. It's the next one we're not going to get because it's the shallow bowl. It'll be more shallow and you'd have more of that burl. So normally, this bowl would be much less appealing than the next one that's going to come out of it. But the only way we could do that now is really shrink this up. There's no reason for that. So we'll change that shape a little more, just so we can get it where I don't have any more flat spot. You notice I'm not pushing the gouge through the bowl real fast. You don't gain anything by moving the tool quickly. The only thing you get out of that is a poor cut and more sanding. And even more chips to eat. All right. So now it looks like I'm just about to make it through it. So I'm going to have to go a little smaller, but this is a good time right now for me to start turning around, cutting back the other direction, set the rim, and then I'll work back towards it. So the reason I do that is if I don't change my approach here, I'll break off these tips and I won't have a clean exit. So the only way to cut these tips smoothly, where I've got all these little spikes, is to come into it. If I try to pull out of it, it's going to rip them right off. Some of them may come off anyway. And a few of them is okay, but if you get more than a few that broke off, it's noticeable on a finished product. I'm going to speed it up just a little bit. And I'm going to start slowly cutting in. I can see a shadow line that I'm eventually going to get to. You can see I'm going to try to get progressively lighter and lighter. Once I get through this cut, I think I'll be where I'm pretty well there. But I don't know yet if I've got flat spots. So now I can walk around it. You got to pay really close attention because like right here's a flat spot. A lot of times if you don't have very good light, it's not that bad, you'll miss it. You don't want to get this bowl done and then realize you got that flat spot, because this piece here, if you turn this in, there won't be anything there. So I've got a flat spot right there, and that's about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it still start out here, cut back in, and this is going to, setting this portion of the rim is going to reshape the bottom side of the bowl. I'm going to make the bottom match what I make my rim, because the rim is the most important part here. I've got to get that first now that I'm closer. So I'm going to take maybe an 1/8 inch. And I'm just going to take it in far enough that I would get through most of the rim there. Let's see if I got it. I feel like I should still have to cut, but I don't see it. Looks like I got it. Didn't take much at all. All right. So now I'm going to sharpen my tool and I'm going to try to push this cut a little further, just so I can continue that curve, and then I'm going to try to come back the other way with a shear cut and align the two so that they match. All right. So I'm going to pick this cut up where I left off, right behind it here. I've got a nice clean edge on my tool, and I'm going to push it and take a look. If I step back right in here where those two joined, it kind of makes I can see a little jerk there where it's not a smooth transition. So I do want to clean that up, but I can clean that up easier with a shear cut than I can trying to, do you have a question, anybody? No. I can clean that up easier with a shear cut than I could if I tried to do a whole full push cut all the way through it. So I'm going to drop the tool down. It's going to miss that top wing and just touch the bottom. And I'm going to try to clean that up as best as I can. If you get a little ridge, it's not a big deal. You can sand out a little ridge. You don't want to dip, because if you have a dip, you have to sand all the wood to the left and right of it. That's almost impossible. If you get a little ridge, that'll sand off pretty easily. If you get a little chatter like that, back up. Don't keep pushing into it. And I'm just trying to rework and I'll have to clean this up. I can still see a transition problem right here, but I can fix that with that same shearing cut. So I'm going to work it all the way to the base, and then I'm going to come back out and fix this rim. It's the same thing. Handle down. I've created that V for me to operate within, so I'm not going to work over here where I don't have the ability to keep the handle down. I'm going to keep it over here from here in. Take a light as cut as I can. This is a finishing cut, so it's not You're not expecting a heavy cut. You're looking for a light. We want to get this as smooth as we can. And if I have to use a little oil to get a smoother cut, I'm going to do that. The less sanding we can do, the better. On the outside of the bowl, of course, you can sand a little more because you haven't set the thickness yet. When you get to the inside, you've already set your thickness, so you don't have a real strong wall to deal with anymore. You don't want to apply a lot of pressure sanding anyway. I just want to be able to step back and make sure I've got a pretty continuous, smooth curve. So take a couple more cuts. We'll take a look at it. All right. So as I rotate through it, you can see I've got a little bruised grain right here. I need to deal with that. Other than that, it's pretty good. So I've got this part up by the rim I haven't shear cut yet, so I need to do that to clean it up. And I've got this bruised grain where it tore on me a little bit. Now if I can find it. There it is. Usually it occurs right at the edge of the end grain. So usually in the middle of the end grain, you're usually okay, but as you get towards the entrance and exits of it, sometimes it gives you that trouble. So we're going to put a little oil on it. Now normally I'd use Tung Oil on this particular bowl, but right now I have mineral oil, so that's what we're going to use. But at home I would use Tung Oil, because that's the type of finish I'm going to put on this bowl. All right, so now we're going to pull through that and see if we can clean it up. I'm going to shift my tool rest a little bit, just so that I can continue to have that handle down. It's real important to keep the handle down. As soon as you lift the handle, you're no longer shear cutting, you're just scraping. We don't want to scrape. Slow and steady. There's no reason to hurry. You guys have all night, right? Right. Yeah.
What time's your meeting tomorrow?
Yeah. So we're pretty good. I'll do one more cut, and then we could sand whatever's left behind. Could easily sand. I still had mineral oil on that area, so I don't need to reapply it. And I would prefer not to if I don't have to, because the more mineral oil I take off, the easier it is to sand. The more I leave there, the more paper it's going to clog. Yeah.
If you were to use tung oil, wouldn't you have to wait a day for it to dry?
Nope, you don't want it to dry.
You don't want it to dry.
Yep, you want it to be wet. And all it's doing is just changing the characteristic of the wood fibers. So it allows you to cut through them cleaner. It makes it closer to cutting green wood. So if you notice on green wood, you can get a pretty glassy smooth cut almost any time if you rub the bevel and cut with the proper direction. On dry wood, when you have that problem, you're kind of trying to mimic that. So you put the oil on it, let it soak in a little bit, and it's giving you a similar scenario where I don't know if it softens. Everyone always told me it softens the fibers. I don't know if that's true, scientifically. That's just what people have told me. But it's always worked very well for me. So I always say it softens the fibers, but I could be making it up. But the important part is that it will cut cleanly. Okay, so now I need to cut a shear cut through this intermittent rim all the way down and blend it. So you got to be very careful here, because if I shift or dip or move it in, I'm going to lose part of that rim. So I'm going to come over as far left here as I can. It's a nice slow cut. The same thing, it just barely misses that top wing of the bowl gouge and touches the bottom. I'm trying not to put hardly any pressure into the wood. Just a very light cut. With the shear cut, you can really go almost either direction and get almost the exact same cut. All right, so now I want to walk around the bowl, make sure I haven't broke off any of the nubs. Make sure every time it exits into air that it's clean. If it's not, I want to cut it again. I've got a spot right here where it's still got the bandsaw mark. You can just barely see it, but it's there. So I know I've got to do a few more cuts to get rid of that. Other than that, it looks very good. So we'll do a couple more cuts for that. It wouldn't be very noticeable. As long as you went an 1/8 inch thick, that's such a little spot. Afterwards, if you hit it with a little sandpaper, let's say you forgot that, it would probably be fine. It's so little. But we're going to go ahead and take a cut, see if we can fix it. What's that?
I'm surprised you do that good a job of that lathe moving like that.
Oh, well, I'm moving. I bounce with it. It's moving a little bit, but it's okay. I think that's the camera. I think it's not moving that much. Were you doing that?
Not on purpose.
Oh. That would be, I couldn't move with that.
This club's got a lot of critics, man.
Yeah. That's okay. I don't mind critics. You know, I do a lot of this, but I'm still learning just as much as everybody else. You know, I all the time I'm picking up new things. Frequently I'll have students, you know, in their first beginner's class will come up with something, and I'm thinking, I've done this for 12 years. Why haven't I thought of that?
Do you use any, like the golden rule
The no, not on bowls. You know, I used to fuss with that on bowls, but eventually, you find what works for you. You find what's comfortable, what you enjoy looking at. You know, I spend hours when I started out, and still today sometimes on a finished piece, I'll sit there and stare at it. You know, I'll set it on the mantle and stare at it while I'm watching TV. I'll watch the bowl more than the TV, and just admire the shape and identify things I could have changed. So very rarely, if ever, do I bother with measuring the 2/3, 1/3, or, you know, the golden mean. Now, lidded boxes, sometimes I pay a little closer attention. Personally, I've found that I just can't sell lidded boxes for what I need to get out of them. So unless they're very intricate and I'm going to sell them for quite a bit, I don't make them anymore. You know, but I still do a few of them. I had one bad spot up towards the rim, which is the hardest part to get because it's so intermittent. And it was a spot that I created. So when I first went into it, I dipped it a little bit and I created a spot that I got to now fix. That happens a lot on intermittent cuts. Let's see if that's good enough. So I'll roll back around. I'm looking for broken edges. You know, a few of them are going to happen. I'm not worried about one or two here and there, but I don't want anything that's bad. And, okay, it looks pretty good. So I've got to fix this foot now so that it's appropriate for the chuck. Now you get your greatest hold on the smallest diameter foot that fits the jaws, because when the jaws are fully closed, it's the only time they're at an actual circle. One-way jaws are designed a little different, but Vic Mark jaws, which are my favorite, by the way.
Now there's two of them.
I promise to work it in at least one more time. Apparently there's an ongoing thing here. But you know, one-way jaws, I think when you close them all the way, it's not round. Is that right? So I think when there's...
They have jaws that aren't too.
So I think they have both, yeah. So on some of theirs, you would want it to be a little greater. But on the jaws for my chucks, if you are closer to where it's fully closed, you're going to have more contact.
Have you ever used an easy way chuck?
The easy tools, the ones where they just pop out?
Yeah.
No, they don't make a chuck physically big enough that I wanted. You know, I love the concept. I looked at them and I looked at them. I thought, well, that's great. It's $400. I don't know if it's $400 great for me just yet, but I bet if they came out with a larger chuck, I would probably buy it. You know, but the one they have now is smaller, and I like to do big work. You know, I would much prefer to do a 20-inch diameter bowl than I would a 10-inch diameter bowl because it's fun. But and their chucks just aren't quite big enough. So I recently bought that other Vic Mark chuck that I had over there. That's the key type. And I looked at the easy ways, and they had a big one. I probably would have tried it. They probably will in the future. Or more likely, every other company will knock off the design or something similar, and you'll be able to have whatever brand you want. like Vicmark, right? That's twice. You owe me like 20 bucks now. It was like $10 per time, I think, is what we agreed on. Oh, no, that's not true. I just want this to be on the recording that I did not say that, nor would I ever. No, there's a lot of good companies out there. You know, it's we all pick and choose which one we like, and then once you're invested, you feel invested and you stick with it. You know, so yeah. There you go. You know, once I bought 6 or 7 different jaws for Vicmark chucks, there was really no possibility of me switching to another brand for any standard chuck. Oh, you know what I need to do? Just in case, I've still got some kind of uneven wood around the back side of this. I don't want it to bottom out in the chuck, because we've probably all done that, where you go to put it in the chuck and it rocks on the bottom and the jaws won't seat. So on most bowls, you just put them back on and take that off. On this bowl, who knows if we can get it back on the same. So we're going to try to be a little smarter than that and take it off. All right, I think we're good. All right, we'll flip her around. And then we'll do the easy part, in theory. To me, most of your time should be spent on that outside, because that is everything. If we had, if I had a post for my coring system, this would be a very good candidate to core if I had brought the 1-inch post.
Speaking of your coring system, now you said you had McNaughton, but you would rather...
Well, for me, I like the McNaughton. It's quick and easy, but I think some of the other ones are probably easier to learn and use. Yeah, if I don't use the McNaughton for a while, it takes me. I'll tell you this, I don't want anyone watching me trying to relearn it. So if I don't use it for 6 months and I decide I'm going to turn a bunch of bowls, those first 3 or 4 are not really the best ones done. If you did it all the time, once I get going on it and I do 20 or 30 of them, then I'm back into it. I've got the motion. You kind of re-get the feel, and then in one smooth pass you can knock a core. But I'm not always the best at it if it's been a long time, but since I've used it. And some friends of mine have the one way, and they seem to really like it. I think you're more limited on the size shape you can knock out with the one way, maybe. I watched David Lancaster kind of prove that wrong one time, but I still think the McNaughton probably has a little easier flexibility. But they're both good systems. I don't like the cone systems because you don't get near as many bowls. Yeah, I think they're probably easier and they're probably quicker. In fact, I have that ability with my McNaughton. It comes with a straight blade where you can just do cones. It's still got the rubber tip on it from 7 years ago. Drop this down. All right. So now here it's very important, you put it in the chuck and you squeeze it. Sometimes if you get soft wood, it'll kick it a little bit. So sometimes you go through all that work and then you put it in the chuck and you might realize that you have to rework the outside again. Because just compressing the fibers, it might not compress evenly. The bowl might kick a little bit, and by the time you get all the way out here on the rim, you might have a 16th inch movement. Maybe it's only a 32nd, but if you're going an 1/8 inch, a 32nd is noticeable. So in this case, it's very, very smooth. So if I wanted to come out and try to clean it up a little bit, I could, but there's really no reason to. But if it had moved a little bit for me, I'd need to pull the tool rest around and just re-shear cut the whole outside to get it back perfectly round. All right. I'm a little too high with the tool rest. Okay. So these are all going to be intermittent cuts, so I need to make them pretty light right now because I don't want to get a catch. Because if it's going to happen, is usually going to happen right here on these intermittent cuts. So I'm just going to kind of get rid of some of the wood that's in my way. If we had cored this, we would core it, and it would core pretty, maybe in 3 minutes you could knock a core out of this, no more than that for sure. And then we'd have a bowl that's a 1/2 inch thick. We just have to turn that down to a little thinner. So on expensive woods, the coring systems are well worth the money if you're willing to learn how to use them. So I'm not in a hurry. My ring's bothering me, so I'm going to put it in my pocket. It's usually a bad idea to have rings anyway. My wife disagrees, but I don't wear a watch, so I don't have to worry about that. But anything that could catch on your tool rest can cause you to stop suddenly or jerk one way or the other. We don't want to do that. Now I don't want to take too much wood out of the middle. When you're making a thin bowl, you need the support of the wood in the center. So I need to set the rim thickness and slowly move the whole bowl in. So right now the whole center has to go because the center is sticking out 1 inch past where my rim is. So it doesn't really matter how much I take out of the center for a while. But eventually I need to slow down and not take quite so much out of the center. Because that's what's going to provide support as I cut the sidewall. And I'm going to need that so I can get a smooth cut. Notice every cut's similar. I'm riding the bevel. I'm cutting on the tip. Right now I'm taking about a 1/4 inch cut. So I'm cutting from the tip down the bottom edge about a 1/4. You can see my bevel is twice the size of what I had earlier today. So that's just because I'm doing a lot of rough cuts. I'll shrink that up later on as I do more finished cuts. You don't have to. It's easier for me on the smaller bevel to wrap it around the curve. And that's why frequently I'll change it while I'm turning. It's also easier to do when you sell bowls because you have money coming in to buy gouges. But if you're just doing it for fun, maybe you don't change that bevel quite so much. Or a lot of people have multiple gouges with different bevel. If you look at most of them, even like Mike Mahoney, I noticed he has like 3 different bevels for sale in the catalog, and that's why he probably just keeps 3 gouges with the different bevels. I'm either too stubborn, not that smart, I'm not sure which, but I've never bothered with lining up a bunch of gouges. So we'll keep cutting this down. As we get closer and closer, I'm going to keep moving this tool rest to get me closer, because I want to set the depth. Now you can see I still have a lot of wood in the center compared to my rim. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that wood so that I can get my tool rest more positioned where I want. I used to always think I was a pretty fast turner. Recently I went to St. John, the Virgin Islands, for a couple weeks. There's a professional turner that lives on St. John, Avellino Samuel. I went and visited him for a day, and he turned with me. So I turned about 4 bowls while I was at his house out of woods that were from there. And he made hollow forms, the size of a milk jug in 45 minutes. Hollowing them out. It was unbelievable. Now most of his work, he carves all his work afterwards. So to him, the lengthy process is after the fact, after it's off the lathe. But it was amazing to see how fast some people, when they do something repetitively and they really focus on how to become as efficient as possible, how quick they can be. I just couldn't believe it. He's making hollow forms quicker than I was making bowls. He makes all his own tools. A pretty good size, maybe 1.25 inches. He does a lot of the finials, so all of his has big finials. Beautiful work. If you ever get down to St. John, look him up. The closer I get, the slower I need to go. And I need to figure out how deep I have to go to get past the intermittent cut in one push. So I'm probably not going to be able to do that. You can see how far down this one is? Are we on the top one? Oh, switch to the top camera. You're not. I almost always like my finished cuts to do the whole rim in one pass. So I want to push this cut from the outside edge all the way in far enough to get past all the inside parts. So it's all one smooth, continuous cut until I get into the bowl far enough that I'm no longer on an intermittent cut. The reason for that is I don't want a ridge in the middle of this intermittent cut because it's hard to sand that ridge out. But this particular instance, that's going to be a pretty long cut, longer than I'd normally want to go. So I'm going to have to go from point to point, maybe 1.5 inches to get past that rim. So I'll try to do that, but it's awful far to get that far. I might end up stopping halfway through this point and then trying to blend it. And I'm getting a smooth cut, so I want to make sure that I'm getting a smooth cut plenty far. So I can see, I've got an intermittent cut, so I can see the tool. I can see the tip of the tool for at least 3/4 of an inch because of the intermittent cut. So I can watch that I have the right thickness. It doesn't hurt to stop every once in a while and check, so maybe I'm at a 1/4 inch right now, maybe a little over. So I'm going to sharpen my tool just because I want this to be as clean as possible. And if I go a little deeper, I should be able to get most of that in one cut. I just roll the tool on the grinder and remove the back of that. I'm just going to remove the back of that heel. It's a little warm. The wood won't mind. So I got to make at least 2 cuts, I think, to get to where I want to be. All right, let's take a look. All right. So I use these little calipers. I bought them over at Grizzly. Is that Springfield? Yeah, that's Springfield, isn't it?
You had those with you the last time?
Yeah, I bought them last time. I think I was here. There we go, didn't want a 0. All right. Oh, metric, I don't want that. I don't operate very well. I wish I did operate better at metric, but I don't. All right, so on the inside I'm at 0.22, the outside I'm at 0.14. So I need to take, I want to get down to about 0.12, 0.1, somewhere in there. So put me between 1/8 inch and 3/32. So I'm going to start with a very light cut and then progressively double it, at least double it, so that I can get to my finished thickness all the way through. I'm going to speed it up just a little bit, get those points to swing around a little quicker. That should get me pretty close. I think I can get it in one more cut. Now, if you're going to allow your bowl to get a little thicker as you go down, that's fine. Most people aren't going to notice that, but not on the rim. Because if you don't get this rim the same thickness from one point all the way through, you get into it where it's solid, you'll see it by looking at the edge. So it's really important, if nothing else, you get this rim. I'm at 0.17 to 0.11, so I'm close. So, even if you are a little uncomfortable and maybe you want to go to 3/16 of an inch as you get through it, get this rim set at an 1/8 inch and no one will know the difference. Well, most people won't know the difference. The thickness of a cut, rather than trying to watch the tip of it straight down, I'm watching how thick of a cut I'm picking up. Because now at that point I know how much I need to take off. All right, almost there. We're at 0.15. To our 0.11, so we got to take a little more. This is the most important part of the whole bowl. Getting that rim set just the way you want it. All right. That should do it. So I'm going to get rid of some of this wood that's on our way. And then now I got to try to push that rim past the next intermittent spot. All right. Let's see if I got it past it. A little dusty. Almost. You can see I'm still there. So I'm at 0.11 all the way through. So now I've just got to move in the center, and then I've got to pick my cut back up somehow and get past that last little bit that I haven't done yet. So what we'll do, we won't sharpen the gouge yet. We're just going to use it as it is. Get rid of the middle, because we're just wasting away wood anyway. And then we're going to come back, sharpen it, and push the rim the next section. Any questions, everybody?
In a comment, this morning you mentioned properly to dig and make sure you don't have a sharp edge on the pieces you're rotating.
Yeah.
Now, for somebody who's never done this before, they've got to remember they've got a saw blade running next to the back.
Well, yeah, it is a little pointy. That's true. Yeah, so obviously the front of this, we're not going to cut it off to keep us from cutting ourselves, because that's exactly what we're trying to keep. So, you know, you've now got an intermittent cut that you certainly don't want your hand or knuckles getting into. There's a good point, because kind of out of habit, you notice I capture the tool on top. So I put my hand over top. These are all specific cuts, you know, so they're all shortcuts, precise. So to do that, I put my hand on top of the tool rest and I capture it. But out of habit, no, I can't let the left side of my hand drift on the other side of the tool rest, right? So at home I use a more traditional tool rest, and I don't think it's much different on this one. It feels a little better to me because you can drop your hand down below the top edge of the whole tool rest. We're on a round tool rest, halfway, you know, your high point is halfway in the middle, versus on a traditional tool rest it's all the way left. So in this particular instance, I would probably prefer to have the other tool rest, because I could put that edge all the way up by that rim and I could keep my hand on the down slope, never towards that edge. Right now, I drift over the center. It's just on this side of the bowl, on my side of the bowl, so I don't have any issue with it. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I'll probably wait for my hair to vibrate a little bit, and then I'll back off. Yeah. But that would probably work. Put a little masking tape, and if you feel that, flip around and catch your hand. Then you know you're getting a little too close. It's a good idea. You know, over time, you get a really good feel for where you need to be. So I'm taking as big a cut as it'll let me, about a 1/4 inch, maybe a little more. This is all waste wood, so we really just want to get through it so that we can get back to setting our bowl quicker. Got a little too big of a cut there. So if you notice it started to bounce, you always want to back off. I don't know if you notice that anytime I feel it bouncing, I don't keep pushing. I always back off and go back into it. If you keep pushing, you'll progressively, the bounce will get worse and worse and worse, and eventually that's when you get that catch. So if you start to feel it bounce a little bit, you're just pushing a little too quick. Back off, start over. I can go back into where it was bouncing, and I can just pause, let it catch up. It'll get even again, and then I can push it in. You never want to force anything. So I'm getting closer to where I'm going to have to start making finish cuts. Got a little left on me there. All right. So we got to turn the tool rest so that I can have it inside there a little bit, and then we're going to clean the rest of that up. And now we'll be able to get it all the way past where we're at. Okay, so we're going to sharpen the tool again. All right, so I know I got to make more cuts, but I want to have a better idea of how much has to go. All right, so I got about 0.05 to shave off of that. Come back behind it. You hear it vibrating? It's because it's already moving, you know. So when you do a thin bowl, that's why you have to set the thickness as you go. You know, once you get past so far in, you can't come back and touch the rim because it's going to be way out of round. And by way, a 32nd of an inch is a long ways out of round once you're moving.
You ever sand in stages, or you just sand it all?
I always sand it at the end, usually with the lathe off on this bowl. On these type of bowls, a lot of times I'll take a 3-inch disc with a soft pad with the lathe off, and I'll just work from the center out to the rim, center out to the rim. And I do that rather than having the lathe turn. Now the outside, I would have just taken flat sandpaper instead of, not a sanding disc, and I would have sanded it with it running. So normally the outside I'd already have it sanded, and in some cases, depending on the finish, you might put a finish on it. Mine I finish off the lathe, but a lot of people finish on the lathe with Danish oil or other things. I'm going to back up, pick this cut up. Okay, let's see how we did. Not bad. We'll come here. So I'm within 0.02. That's pretty consistent. I mean, I can live with that. It's not bad. If you get a little bit of ridges or something, don't worry about it on a thin bowl. That'll come out very easy with the sandpaper, So the challenge here is you have a lot of start and stops. So when you're doing a bowl like this, you're going to end up with some transitional problems. You just want them to be very small so they'll sand easy. But don't feel like you have to get every little transitional issue out. A lot of people will take a shear scraper and go in there. Ben Foe does this, and he'll start in stages and he'll drag that back out with a shear scraper and clean that up. I've never done that, but I know Ben does. At least he did years ago when I saw him demonstrate several times. So it's certainly something you can do. I've found that especially on soft elm like this, if I have a small issue like that where you can barely feel it, you can see it, but you can barely feel it, it'll sand out very easily. We'd all like you to believe that we can finish every bowl without sanding, but in actuality, I haven't met a woodturner yet that can do that. I'm sure they're out there, but there aren't many of them. So don't feel like you're ever going to make a bowl and it's going to be perfect with absolutely no sanding. That's not really a common thing to be able to do. You just want to limit it to the least amount of sanding as possible. So once again, I'm taking bigger cuts because all this is just waste wood. What's that?
How far do you go on your sand?
400 grit. Unless it's exotic, then I go to 2,000. So like African blackwood, cocobolo, on those if you stopped at 400 grit, you would see the sanding lines pretty easily. So you almost have to, like African blackwood, you almost have to polish. But the other thing on those is you really want to get a clean enough cut to start at 180. So if you're turning African blackwood or cocobolo, you want to pay enough attention, and they cut much cleaner, so it's easier to do that, but you want to be able to start about 180. Otherwise, you put such deep scratches in it, it's just so difficult to get them out. But on all domestic woods, I go to 400 grit. And the majority of what I turn is locally found domestic woods. There's a lot of free wood, so I buy more wood than most, but if you look at percentage wise, I easily turn 95%, 90% woods I found and did not purchase. I've made quite a few bowls for the botanical garden, and in doing that, I had an opportunity to use woods that that they take down out of there. So I get a lot of unusual woods that way. There's a lot of places you can get woods from, and I don't know if everybody ran up to the botanical garden if they give anybody wood, but if you found the right person, they probably would. I happened across it and over time formed a relationship. But most places are more than happy to provide you wood if they have it they need to get rid of. All right, so I took a little bit of a chance on that last cut because I'm not 100% sure how much I needed to cut off it. I was guessing. I'm pretty sure I'm fine. Yeah, I'm 0.05 too big, a little more at some point, so I was all right. You got to watch how many chances you take when you're doing thin, because you'll get to the bottom and you zig instead of zag, and then you're trying to recreate something new out of what you just made. We get a lot of design opportunities in wood turning, but we try to limit them if we can. All right, we're still a little big down there on the bottom. That should get it. All right. Any questions? Make sense to everybody? People outside supposed to be in here instead of us. Maybe they're just watching. Yeah. All right. It feels smooth. I can see some ridges, or I can see some spots, where I'd have to sand them out, but it feels smooth. Sometimes, even with a small bevel, you rub it a little bit, and you bruise that grain. What I'd assume is going on there. All right, now I got to go back, take more out of the center. Always check it before you turn it on. I probably spun that a little quick, because if I spun it that quick and it hit, it'd probably break. So I always want to slowly spin it, maybe. This is the most boring part of making a bowl, isn't it? A lot of fun. It's more interesting when you're starting and finishing. But that middle part sometimes gets a little boring. So notice all my cuts are the same way, so I'm not rotating the tool multiple times trying to find a cut. All of them, it's about 45 degree on the tool. All of them are towards the center. It's the same over and over. If you want to get good at wood turning, practice roughing bowls out, because that'll teach you how to, and watch where you're shooting the chips. That's going to teach you how to turn. It's going to teach you how to hold the handle. And use green wood. Don't practice on dry wood. Green wood's a lot more fun to turn than dry wood. Sorry, I gotta adjust. They make this thing for skinny heads, I can tell. I got a fat head. At least I got one a little fatter than this thing wants to fit on. All right, so I'm going to turn my tool rest around again, because as I get closer to making a finished cut, I don't want to have to hang way off the tool rest. It's the same thing. I want to keep that leverage on my side as much as possible. And I got it's a little bumpy right here that I don't like. Let's see if I got enough wood there to pull a little bit off. If I could pull a 64th off or something, I could pull a little bit off. All right. Let's see how much it's bouncing. If it's bouncing too much, it's bouncing a little. So I just tried to shave a really thin, maybe 64th or so, just so I get a little smoother. I had a bump there that was going to drive me crazy. That's much better. Okay. So now I'm going to keep working, get it a little closer, then I'll sharpen. I just want to pay attention to my thickness. All right. It gets harder to tell which your angle as you get deeper into the bowl. So the deeper in you get, sometimes your curve changes. It gets a little more swift. And if you don't pay close attention, it's really easy to get that sidewall too thin. So if I can get it close enough to being even, not necessarily the right thickness yet, it'll help guide me as I make these next cuts. All right. So I'll do 2 passes. Now I know I still got a ridge there, but I want to measure to see where I'm at. So I'm at 0.19 on the inside, 0.15 on the outside of that. So I've got to make a cut, 0.03 up to 0.07. Or really light to a little bit thicker is really the way I like to look at it. I need your masking tape for my glasses now. I adjusted the microphone from my fat head and my glasses don't want to stay put.
You probably have some super glue.
Yeah, well, super glue would probably work, but I think I'll pass today. We might try it next time. Just remind me that it was an idea. Oh, you see that? I touched it. I lost one little tip.
I got masking tape.
Now you won't even know the difference. But I did. I lost one little point there. And that's because I hit it too close. I rotated it too quick and this one little spot nipped off. But I'm pretty sure if you came up here and looked, you wouldn't be able to find that one. So in that case, it didn't happen. All right, we're getting closer. And of course, as we get towards the bottom, it should go a little quicker because I don't have nearly as much wood to remove. That a little further there.
Matt,
Yeah.
if this were a piece of wood that had standard bark on the outside, could you create a thin wall like this?
Oh yeah.
Expect the bark to stay stuck?
Oh yeah. I made one that a collector bought from me. That was a 16th inch thick elm, and it had a big bark edge. So one thing I'll tell you, if you want to keep bark on it, for one, use wood that's cut in the winter because the sap's down, it's got a stronger hold. So if you want to keep the bark on there, it's a risk to begin with. It really is. But use wood, cut it in the winter and turn it fresh, start to finish. The other thing is super glue around the rim. Give it an extra shot. So anytime I ever turn bark, no matter what, whether it's trying to come off or not, I use thin super glue and I go around the connection point between the bark and the bowl.
On the outside or the inside?
Both. I do both, yeah. I try not to sell too many things with bark on it because, some collectors who own a lot of my work have had that, someone comes over and they pick it up and they grab it and they snap the bark off and, inside their thumb and forefinger. And, they didn't mean it. But the problem is it's a distasteful thought in the purchaser's mind. Every time he sees that bowl, he no longer enjoys it. They're disgusted by it. After a couple people have come back and I could tell they were so disappointed that this had happened, that someone had broke the bark off their bowl, and I have no way to put it back on for them. I wish I did. I really quit keeping the bark on. Unless it's something that really has a good hold. If I really, I got to really feel confident, I'm taking the bark off. You always want, whoever buys your bowl, you want them to enjoy it as long as they own it. You don't want them to look at it and think, oh, I can't believe my wife did that, or I can't believe, my buddy did that, or whoever, or my husband.
A burl is less likely to chip off.
Well, the great thing about a burl is you have that same visual interest whether you have the bark or not. So the reason I took the bark off of this before I came here. Last night I pulled the bark off it. But the great thing about a burl is you have that wonderful undulated edge regardless. Bark on or bark off, doesn't matter. So the burl, I measured it and didn't pay any attention to what it said. The burl is perfect for this type of bowl because you don't need the bark. All right, I should be pretty close.
What percent of your bowls do you have in this thin?
Do I have what?
What percent of your bowls that you make and sell are thin?
Maybe 20%. The one thing I will tell you, the less you can use it, the more you can charge. Right? I mean, that's true. But I sell, and the reason is there's comparisons. You know, if I'm not directly in competition with Pier 1, you know, and if someone is comparing my bowls to Pier 1 or, you know, the Walmarts of the world, they just probably don't get what I do. But I can't expect to charge, you know, 5 times more on a functional salad bowl than what someone can go buy a nice salad bowl for somewhere else. You know, so on functional bowls, I have to price them to fit within the market that's willing to pay. On non-functional bowls, I get to determine myself what the value of that bowl is, and then let the market tell me back whether or not I'm right or wrong. So I've done very well selling bowls. And in most cases, you know, a bowl of this size and a better burl. This one's quite ugly because it has very little burl. But if it was solid burl, you know, it might be $350. And as long as it's made right, it's finished properly, you know, people don't look at it and see a lot of problems, it's going to sell if it's in the right location. I mean, the other big thing about it is if you want to sell work, regardless of where you go, your work has to be properly priced for where you're selling it, right? You know, if I was just a production turner all day long and all I did was crank out expensive bowls, I'd probably have a big stash of expensive bowls that I was looking for buyers for. But I don't. I do a lot of functional. I really enjoy doing functional bowls. I have a very good market for it. In general, I find functional bowls extremely easy to sell. You know, so I price them what I feel is appropriate, and the market seems to bear every one I make. You know, last year I raised my prices a little bit just because I felt like I could, not because it takes me longer to make them, it takes me less time to make them, I'm better at it. But, you know, when I looked around and looked at other people's work and what they're selling for, I decided I could charge a little more for mine, and I didn't have any negative response at all. I sold just as many bowls, maybe more. The gallery work goes in spurts. So, you know, I might have months where I do nothing. I might have months where I sell, you know, a couple $1,000s. It just up and down, up and down. I haven't really figured it out. The only thing I have figured out is they are very good at promoting me. So even if people aren't, even if I don't have a lot of sales there, when I'm teaching, they're good at promoting me teaching, so they're helping fill my classes. They're good at promoting my name, so people find me on the website and might go to other avenues from my website to purchase my items. So, you know, a good gallery is going to take 50%, guaranteed. If a gallery is taking 30%, it's because they really aren't capable of selling enough product to take 50%. So, you know, there's a couple things when you're selling. You know, one, you can't price things differently in a gallery than you do when you sell them direct. If you do that, no decent gallery will ever work with you. So that's good for me, because if you buy it directly from me, you pay gallery price regardless. You know, it's the same price. You know, I've just committed to it. I don't do this for a living. If I did it for a living, I might have to charge more. I don't know. You know, I'd probably would think about it a little different. But it works great for me. You know, I get a little income from it. I can buy some tools. Like most wood turners, you know, that's all we think about is buying tools. Tools and wood. And you're willing to go out and promote yourself. And, you know, nothing sells itself. You know, if you want to sell bowls, you got to get out there and do it. You know, you got to live through the days of sitting 8 hours at a fair and not selling a single piece, you know, or paying $400 to be at a show and sell 75. I mean, it's happened to me. You know, it happens to everybody. You can kind of forget about that and enjoy the good time you had talking to people. Yeah. But I've had bad shows. I've had weekends where I sold one bottle stopper. And in the moment, you kind of think, why am I doing this? Then you go home, you make another bowl, and you forget about the bad weekend. You know, for every weekend you made $50, you know, there might be another one you made $5,000. It just, who knows, you know, it's, I don't know the right formula necessarily to get it every time. You know, over time, what you start to learn is which shows, which areas can handle your work. You know, I used to do Queenie Park a lot, and there was a definite price range. You know, if I wanted to do well there, I needed to have pieces priced between $50 and $200. And as long as I came with a large amount of pieces in that price range, I was going to do well. And the year I thought I was better than most artists, and I showed up with a bunch of big stuff that's, you know, 500 to 3,000, I sat there all weekend and sold bottle stoppers. You know, and that's just, you know, every area is like that. You got to figure it out. If you do a show one time, you do bad, don't necessarily decide that this show is no good. You just haven't figured out yet where the right price point is. You know, if I went to Clayton and I had all $100 pieces, I'd come home broke. I wouldn't sell anything. You know, people go to big shows expecting to buy higher end art. And if you're going to go to a bigger show, well, first you need to be able to create it. And if you do create it, you need to make sure you take it. So it's half the fun about doing shows is figuring out the formula that works at each one. It's just not the same for any given show. You know, but if you can handle putting yourself out there and taking criticism and taking the good with the bad, then you're going to have a good time. Yeah, the jury process, you know, you have to remember those judges in some cases get 3 seconds on your slide. 3 seconds. So in 3 seconds they have to say hold or pass. And then they'll come back through. But if you don't have an image, if your image is poor quality, they don't even look at the work. All they see is a poor quality image, you know. So I went out when I was starting out and I purchased a high-end setup, you know. So I bought nice lights. I bought the backdrops, you know, for doing furniture. I bought big graduated backdrops for doing my other work. And after I bought that, I haven't been declined from a show yet. And part of it's because I spend a lot of time setting pieces up, getting the right lighting. You know, I might spend an hour photographing when I'm going to submit one piece, when I'm going to submit to a show, making sure it's right. And if you don't have the ability to do that, you probably need to pay somebody who can do it for you, who's a photographer. Because it's, you know, the better the show is, the more critical they're going to be of your image. If the image is bad, they never get to the work. Yep, they have such, you know, they have thousands of images to get through in a short amount of time. And if you didn't take the time to get a really fantastic image, they don't need to take time with you. And that's just how they are. So I'm having a little trouble just because with this tool rest, it's a little thicker back towards my tool, and the knob of this handle is hitting the tool rest, and what it's doing is as I hit that, I no longer have control of that tip. I'm forced to do what the tool rest is allowing me to do. So if I had a little longer one, I might be able to manipulate it a little better, but I keep my tips of the bowl keep wanting to hit this post. So it's not quite long enough. I might switch to that other one that I brought. Oh, I can't. It's the post is too long. One way or another, we're going to, let's measure. So I keep talking, and I did measure. The problem is when you talk too much, you don't actually pay attention to what you're doing sometimes. All right, so we're at 0.19, found about 0.13, so all right. So I'm pretty close to being able to round this bottom out. I'm going to have to change the angle on my gouge again. Yeah, I like doing shows, I really do. But I also limit how many I'm willing to do, which probably keeps me enjoying them. You know, so I usually do shows about every other year and no more. Because I found if I do 7 shows a year every year, 8 shows a year, it's no fun. Getting ready for a 3-day show is a lot of work. And producing enough product is a lot of work. You know, that's the other thing is as soon as you don't have enough product for people to choose from, your sales will just come to a screeching halt. So, you know, last year at the Missouri Botanical Garden, I was in their Best of Missouri Market. You know, I'm going to be back there this year. It's, you know, by Sunday, I had I had sold so much and I had so little left that I almost had no sales because people don't have anything to pick from. If they come, then you got 20 bowls and that's all you have. And they were there Friday and you had 150, you know, they're pretty unhappy. They said, well, I missed all the good ones. All the good ones, you know, someone else bought all the good ones and now I get the leftovers. And I keep telling them I saved the best for last. That's not the way it is. I saved the best. They haven't believed it yet, but I keep trying. Okay, so now we're almost done. We still have to cut across that bottom, and I need to change the shape of this tip because at this point, in order for me to ride the bevel, I'd have to break the rim of the bowl. I can't get this handle in the right position. So the only way I'm going to be able to get to use the bevel and go across the bottom is if I change that angle of that bevel. Right now it's like this, and I'm going to bring it over. Okay? Now if you had multiple gouges, you just, you know, keep one sharp on the other way. Okay. So the other thing you can see, I need to get to there. I can't even get the tool in far enough. So I'm going to extend my tool out, which is going to give me a little more trouble with chatter. But in this instance, I'd probably be better off. Oh, you guys, you have a curved tool, Russ. I might try that. So I'm going to extend this tool out, give myself an extra inch or so. This tool is about twice as long as what you see there, so I got plenty of tool still left in the handle. It's got a gouge on both sides. Now let's see if I can get this just a little closer. This particular one is a one-way double cut. I bought these years ago and I didn't use them. I've probably had them for 6 years and I never used them. I just started using them, and part of the reason was I think it's better now, but back then when they made them, this top edge was sharp. And every time it's still sharp. If you feel this before I leave today, sometimes I'd cut my hand holding the gouge. So, you know, a lot of people would just shave the top off. I think nowadays, you know, I bought these when they first came out with them, and I think that's probably a process they fixed. But the last 3 I bought were Doug Thompson's. He said you guys were here. And they're very good tools, yeah. No, but I don't. I thought the double-ended felt great when I bought it because I get 2 for 1, I thought, but I don't ever flip it around, so maybe it's not as great as I initially thought. It's still not a bad thing. It's just, I'm not sure that personally I feel it's necessary anymore. When I wear this side out and I flip it around, I'll probably come back and tell you different. So next year, or 2 years from now, if I come down, I'll say, yeah, this is great because I just ran out and I flipped it around. I still have another tool. All right, so it gets challenging on the bottom, especially when I can't quite get in there because I'm so far away. You know, so I'm so far away from the tip of my tool. You got to try to take lighter and lighter cuts. And right now, I'm not real sure how smooth of a cut I'm getting, so I'm going to make one more cut, try to make it a little bit lighter, and then take a look. Now, if you notice, when I pull the tool out, I'm so far in, I try to just come straight out. You don't want to swing it out to the side because you might hit the edge. Yeah, there's probably been a few of us have done that before. Yeah, we've all done that. It's pretty easy to do. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, if you say you don't ever make those mistakes, you know, it's the same thing, you know, every once in a while I still touch the wood before I touch the tool rest, and you know, and you get smacked down. That's the first night of class. I always warn everybody it's going to happen tonight. Just don't get shook. So I think my sidewall is good. My bottom It's pretty good. I got a little bump in the center. So I'm at 0.13. So I've got as much as a 0.03 difference along the full side of the bowl, which isn't much. Feels pretty good. All right, let's do the foot. So now if I was at home, I'd sand it. So what I would do is I'd take the hand sander and I'd work from the center out. And only don't go back in. I'd only come off. Because if you try to go in, what you'll do is you'll sand your rim too thin. Because you might accidentally, as you go in, if you tilt it wrong, you just sand it flat. So you always want to just work your way off. Work your way off. Don't come back into it. Because if you come back in, you have to be holding that just perfect to try to catch it and not damage the rim. So always work out. And if it really makes you uneasy, you can just take hand sandpaper and just sand the rim. And then, you could sand the inside with it running if you wanted. Just stay away from the rim. Not a problem at all. Tell me if I'm talking too much.
You mentioned a minute ago about putting super glue to hold the mark on.
Yep.
This super glue interfere with the finish that you lay on.
No, I have not had a problem with that. Now it might depend on the finish you use. So for me, I'm going to put the super glue on and I'm going to sand it. So when you sand it, you're going to re-expose wood fibers to accept the finish. So now you wouldn't want to sand after you, or glue after you sand. I mean, I've never had an issue, but I always do all my super gluing before I start sanding. So I don't sand up to 300 grit and then put super glue on, because then you're going to see it for sure. So let's see if this is big enough. Yep, it'll work. If it wasn't big enough, we were just going to make one. I brought a little piece of black locust there. We would just make one of these and use a paper towel. So this wall is not extremely thin. It's a little over 1/8 of an inch at 0.13. So I don't really have to be concerned about cracking the sidewall. If we went thinner, and a lot of times I will, especially like if you're turning pine and you want the light to transluce through it, you really need it thin. 3/32 probably at the thickest. In which case, you have to be extremely careful about the pressure you apply, because you'll split the sides. So I'm not going to have that problem on this bowl, I don't believe. But I'll use the same method of holding the bearing that I did earlier. What I want to check. I'm sure I'm fine. But being a non-functional bowl, I would like to extend this foot. So in the center, well, we're not on that camera, but in the center, I've got maybe the thickness of the foot. You see that? So what that tells me is I need that foot. I went too far on the center of this bowl, too deep. And if I try to take that foot off, we're going to have a hole, right? So that's good for me, because I prefer the foot to be smaller, because I want this to appear to be less and less functional. This is not meant to be used. I don't want people to think, let's put jelly beans in it or whatever. I want them to think, when they're going to buy it, that it's art. And then they can put jelly beans in it, I don't know. But first, I want them to think art. So, I still got to be careful, because it is still thin. Make sure that's tight. And it will break if I'm careful. If you don't make it tight enough, as you're finishing it, the bowl will stop turning. And then what happens is the other piece keeps going and you burn a nice rim. And if you've tried to sand that nice burn route, it's not coming. So that's when you use paint and you try something new. We used to do a thing at the Woodturners of St. Louis called Revolution Evolution, where people would bring in wood turnings throughout their whole time. And the first time I had to do that, I didn't want to bring my early pieces in, but my buddy talked me into it because I had to felt the bottom of the bowl on both sides, inside and out. I had felted the bottom, or flocked. I think I had used flock, I don't know. You know, the first lathe I had, my father had made with a couple angle irons. We had a motor. We had an old Oliver spindle that he had found somewhere, put it between pillow blocks. No tailstock. The tool rest was homemade. You know, the motor was just on a loose piece of plywood that the weight of it was held the belt tight. So it was an interesting way to try to finish a bowl. Didn't have a chuck, you know, so everything was face plated start to finish. So I used a lot of felt early on when I first tried it. I worked midnights for a while, and that's where before I had purchased any lathes or joined the club, that was my first experience to it. And in about 6 months, I knocked the panel out of the garage door. I broke a window. You know, I tried taking a 6x6 piece of zirconia 2 inches thick and making it round on the lathe because I didn't have a bandsaw. So my idea was I'd use a spindle roughing gouge to make it round, and I split the spindle roughing gouge, the handle, about 3 inches down, you know, because of course, can you imagine a square piece of wood coming around at you and you're jabbing a spindle roughing gouge in at it? Of course, we all know now, what I should have known then from the videos I watched, that that's a bad idea. Yeah, but you know, when I started out, my dad, he was a shop teacher, but he didn't have much experience on the lathe, so he showed me what little he knew. And the rest I tried to learn. You know, the video I started out with was David Ellsworth's on hollow forms. This was my first video I watched and decided I wanted to try wood turning. So of course it gives you no points or tips on how to turn a bowl, so I don't know how I thought I would watch that video and then go make a bowl. But it didn't work out, and eventually I got frustrated and I quit. And if it weren't for, you know, finding those lathes at that auction and then putting them in storage for a couple of years, and then luckily coming across somebody in a club just like this that could bring me in and explain to me why my bowls were too straight-sided or too square, or, you know, help me learn how to make a curved bowl, you know, because I knew I preferred a better curve. I just didn't know how to make one. You know, that's the great thing about clubs, is you have a large amount of people who can help you. All right, so the shape is pretty good. The foot's pretty good. I could go a little smaller, but on this diameter bowl, I think that's probably okay. Now I won't be able to do the same thing where I snapped off the little center, because the wood that would make that cone that I'm going to snap off would have been the tenon. I had to keep the tenon because my bowl was too thin. So I'll just carve off what I can, undercut it, make sure this is undercut. And then what I can't get, eventually I'll carve off with that palm gouge. And of course we would have sanded this. So if I were to, actually the demonstration piece I did for you guys last time, I found it last night. Still not sanded. Or one of them. Did I do a natural edge here? Maybe it was for... I should have left it here because it still, it was literally, it was on my table saw. It was, apparently I haven't used it in a while. Not since I was last here. That was a couple years ago. All right. So, here we have it. Natural edge bowl.